Okay, so we're going to go ahead and look at a document 14.3 called The Slave Trade and the Kingdom of Congo. And so this particular document that we're going to look at is going to kind of highlight something very interesting. This is going to be a letter written from an African king who's embraced the Catholic faith and being sent to the King of Portugal. Now, the King of Portugal is going to be someone that this African king is going to believe is a Christian brother, someone that he believes he can reason with and explain why it's not cool to enslave his fellow Africans. Just a quick reminder, real quick, everything in red here shows you the Portuguese Empire. You can see that, especially in northern Africa, there's these little teeny tiny dots. Those are those coastal enclaves where the Portuguese feel they're safe to trade and to travel. Now, if you look at Brazil, of course, that's Portuguese run. Indian coast, little dots, little enclaves where the Portuguese believe they can trade and travel. But looking at Africa, the huge red portion on the southwest, that is Angola. And that's where the king of Angola, a man named Alfonso I, he's going to take that new Christian European name for himself when he becomes Catholic. Alfonso I will write letters to the king of Portugal saying, please stop the slave trade. Just to remind you, if you look again here at this map, this shows you the slave trade that occurred at this time. And you can see West Central Africa on the western coast. That's where a huge percentage of slaves left Africa. In fact, we estimate that 1/4 of all slaves that entered into the slave trade came from Angola. And so let's go ahead and look on your handout. It's marked at page 6. And we're going to see this letter to the King of Portugal. And here's the King of Portugal. He was the king from 1521 to 1557. And Alfonso I is going to have some complaints that he's going to write to the King of Portugal about how his people have been treated by the Portuguese who have been coming into his land as guests. Here you can see that this is a painting of the Portuguese encountering and coming into contact with the African people there. And here the African people are going to be accepting, the leadership of Congo will accept the Catholic faith and choose to become Catholic themselves. And now what we're going to see is white missionaries will come into the Congo, bringing the Catholic faith and religion. And as you can see, the leadership, here you have a white priest. There'll be white priests sent to live here in the Congo. And they will live here and they will show and instruct the locals how to embrace the Catholic religion. But this is when things go wrong. Look with me on page 706. On the top it says, Your Highness of Portugal should know how the kingdom is being lost in so many ways that it is convenient to provide for the necessary remedy, since this is caused by the excessive freedom given by your factors and officials to the men and merchants who are allowed to come to this kingdom and set up shops with goods and many things which have been prohibited by us, and which they spread throughout our kingdom and domains in such an abundance that that many of our vassals, whom we had in obedience, do not comply, because they have these things in greater abundance than we ourselves. And it was with these things that we had them content and subjected under our vassalage and jurisdiction. So it is doing a great harm not only to the service of God, but to the security and the peace of our kingdom and state as well. In other words, what King Alfonso I is saying to the King of Portugal is, you sent all these whites into our country. There's merchants and there's priests, and that's good, but a problem has occurred. In fact, what he's saying is that you flooded the market here in our country with so many European products that my princes, my vassals, the people that work under my authority, they are able to get those products directly from Portugal very easily. And that's a problem because my people, my vassals, my princes used to look to me as a source of income, look to me as a source of these rare European goods. But now your guys are coming in our country and they have direct access to European products. And if they have direct access to European products, they're not looking to me as a sign of authority anymore. Now, this is a big problem because as the Portuguese and the leaders are entering in, you can see that there's these different goods that these Africans on the very bottom are carrying. And you can see even here's this white priest kind of like being carried around. as he travels throughout Angola, also known as modern day Congo. And so they're bringing these white people, and he's saying that there's a negative impact going on here. Take a look at the second paragraph. It says, "We cannot reckon or explain how great the damage is, since the mentioned merchants, these white European merchants, are taking every day our natives, sons of the land, and sons of the noblemen, and vassals and our relatives, because the thieves and the men of bad conscience grab them, wishing to have the things and wares of this kingdom, which they are ambitious of. They grab them and get them to be sold." So in other words, what he's saying is that when people in our country see the whites in the Congo, they want the products the whites have. They want the guns, they want the textiles, they want the goods. And so what's happening is that people are just actually kidnapping fellow Africans and selling them into slavery to these white Portuguese. Because if you kidnap an African, a fellow African, and give it to a white man, you could get guns and beads and textiles. All those things could be yours to be had directly. So the king of Congo is saying, listen, this is causing just chaos. People are being kidnapped. It's terrible. He goes on to say, they grab them and get them to be sold, and so great, sir, is the corruption and licentiousness that our country is being completely depopulated. Tons of people being kidnapped, and your highness should not agree with this, nor accept it as your service, and to avoid it, we need from those kingdoms no more. He says, basically, this is all I want from you, King of Portugal. Send priests and a few people to teach in our schools, and no other goods except wine and flour for the holy sacrament. So he says, hey, please keep sending white priests. We want our people to be Christian. Send teachers. We want our guys to learn how to practice Christianity and how to read and write. And don't send any physical goods. We don't need any more guns. We don't need anything except for two things. He says wine, because grapes don't grow like that in Africa, cannot make wine, and flour, because wheat is not grown in Africa, you can't make bread. And why do they want wine? Why do they want bread? He says, for the Holy Sacrament. He says, we really just want that stuff so we can have communion. Other than that, don't send any other products. So now, he's requesting that they leave them alone almost. Bring priests. We want priests. We want to learn about Christianity, but don't bring all the other stuff that's causing problems. He goes on to say this. That is why we beg of your highness to help and assist us in this matter, commanding your factors, or in other words, your representatives, that they should not send here either merchants or wares. That word wares means like stuff. Because it is our will that in these kingdoms there should not be any trade of slaves, or an outlet for them. He says, listen, I don't want slavery anymore. Stop sending things that will make our people want to kidnap one another so we don't have slavery. Concerning what is referred above, we beg your highness to agree with it, since otherwise we cannot remedy such an obvious damage. He says, unless you stop sending these people, we can't change it. Moreover, sir, in our kingdom there is another great inconvenience which is of little service to God, and this is that many of our people, keenly desirous of the and as they are of the wares and things of your kingdom, which are brought here by your people, and in order to satisfy their voracious appetite, seize many of our people, freed and exempt men, and very often it happens that they kidnap even noblemen and the sons of noblemen, our relatives, and they take them to be sold to white men who are in our kingdoms, and for this purpose they've concealed them, and others are brought during the night so they cannot be recognized. So he says the problem's even worse, that they're even kidnapping nobles. Even family members of the king are just being grabbed and sold to whites who come to the Congo. The influence of Christianity was not supposed to do this. This is the last thing that he thought would happen. He's saying we have to stop it, that Christianity should bring change to Congo, but not the kind of change that he's seeing now. He says this, as soon as they're taken by the white men, they're immediately ironed and branded with fire. Why ironed and branded? Because you're property. You're not a person. And when they're carried to be embarked, and if they are caught by our guards' men, the whites allege that they bought them, and they cannot say from whom, so that it is our duty to do justice and restore the freemen their freedom, but it cannot be done if your subjects feel offended as they claim to be. In other words, what he says is that they'll sell a kidnapped person to a white person, and if we question them, say, hey, where'd you get this guy? They'll say, well, I don't really know where we got him from. So how can you follow up like that? And in this culture, the word of an offended white man, like, hey, how dare you accuse me of kidnapping, would actually have more weight than like what local Africans might say or object to. To avoid such great evil, we passed a law so that any white man living in our kingdom and wanting to purchase goods in any way should first inform 3 of our noblemen and officials of our court. We will investigate if the mentioned goods are captive or free, and if cleared by them, there will be no further doubt nor embargo for them to be taken and embarked. But if the white men do not comply with it, they will lose the aforementioned goods. So he says, look, it's such a problem that anytime we see a black slave, we investigate, we make sure, are these guys for real slaves, or were they basically stolen or kidnapped? He says, sir, your highness has been kind enough to write to us saying that we should ask in our letters of anything we need, and that we should provide, and we will be provided with everything. And as this peace and the health of the kingdom depend on us, and as there are among us old folks and people who've lived for many days, it happens that we have continuously many different diseases which put us off in such a weakness that we reach almost the last extreme. And the same happens to our children, our relatives, natives, owing to the lack in this country of physicians and surgeons who may know how to cure properly such diseases. And as we have got neither dispensary nor drugs which might help us in this forlornness, many of those who had already been confirmed and instructed in the holy faith of our Lord Jesus Christ perish and die. And the rest of the people, in the majority, they cure themselves with herbs and breads and other ancient methods, so that they put all their faith in those mentioned herbs and ceremonies if they live, and believe that they are saved if they die. And that is not much in the service of God. So in other words, he says, look, we don't have doctors, we don't have basic physicians or healthcare. People try to like do these herbal remedies, and if they live, they like worship that remedy, and they don't give credit or honor to God. And the king, Alfonso, he says, look, I'm a Christian. I want people to know about Jesus. I don't want them worshiping these old ways. What's the solution to that? He says, to avoid such great error and inconvenience, since it is from God in the first place, and then from your kingdom and from your highness that all goods and drugs and medicines have come to save us, we beg of you to be agreeable and kind enough to send us 2 physicians, 2 apothecaries. That word apothecary is like someone who can make drugs, like a pharmacist, and just 1 surgeon, so they may come with their drug stores and all the necessary things to stay in our kingdom, because we are in extreme need of them, and in need of them all and each of them. So he says, look, when you're thinking about what to send priests, send doctors, send help. Don't send these merchants that cause these problems and cause people of Congo to enslave one another. He writes the letter to the king of Portugal, but he doesn't really get the answer he's hoping for, as the legacy and influence of slavery will just continue.